listeners and viewers, to another week at Education, the Teachers Talking Terror podcast, where Mike
and Courtney
are back to talk about another horror film that Courtney has not seen. And that's okay, because you actually asked for this one. That last week, you were like, hey, let's watch some Stephen King. And as we kind of discussed at the end of last week's episode, there's a lot of Stephen King to go through. So we started kind of somewhere in the middle. We started hot and heavy with Carrie, and you've got a Shining in there, and you got a Christine, and then he hits his stride kind of the mid-'80s with, Children of the Corn, and we pick him up in 89 with this week's focus, which is Pet Semetary, one of my favorite Stephen King movies. I do like this movie, so a little spoiler alert, it's going to get a pretty solid grade from me. What did you think?
It is not what I thought. I really liked it. Gage is the cutest child ever. Oh my gosh! before he goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know why I thought this was like about evil pets.
Oh no, that's fair though. I mean, really, because the box, a lot of the box or a lot of the art for the movie has church in it. Their cat. And it is Pet Semetary, and you kind of get a vibe that it's a bringing things back from the dead kind of movie. Oh no, there's like one evil pet, and it's not even the pet's fault, really.
Yeah, like I just was not I'm thinking church is gonna go evil or something. Nope. No, not at all.
Actually, that book was Cujo, which was another movie that we skipped over. Where the evil pet was at Cujo, but this one is not. This one is like voluntary zombification in a way.
Yeah.
In a way. We got the Creed family, Lewis, Rachel, Ellie, and Gage, and their cat, Winston Churchill, because what's more obnoxious than giving your cat a full-length name? But at least he has a nickname. They're moving from Chicago out to Maine, which, if you've read much Stephen King, which I know you haven't because you're not a reader, and if you've seen much Stephen King, which you haven't because we just got started here, Stephen King is from Maine. He lives in Maine and sets an extremely large amount of his novels in Maine. Bangor, Maine being a big one. Ludlow, Maine shows up a few times. And so what's really cool about it is there are some times in the Stephen King literary universe where because so much takes place in Maine, you get little snippets of previous books showing up in later books. You'll have a character in one story referencing the plot as of course, like it was real, like it actually happened, of another town in Maine, which is kind of cool because everything is kind of right there in the same state. So kind of the history of what happens in Stephen King's Maine kind of surfaces throughout a lot of his novelizations, which is really cool. But this one doesn't have any of that. This one is just straight up the Creeds. Lewis is he accepts a job as a doctor at the University of Maine. So they're moving to Maine from Chicago, and they they choose to move to what could possibly be the worst place home in the entire state of Maine. They're like, hey, I found a. First of all, I'm assuming you and Casey have a very clearly communicated relationship.
Yes.
Does he have his own money and you have your own money?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't really have to check with each other on purchases.
No.
As long as your bills get covered. My wife and I share an account, and if I were to buy a house sight unseen to my wife several states away without any of her input at all,
she wouldn't be your wife anymore.
Wouldn't be my wife anymore. And if I were the father, I am the father of 2 children. If I were to have moved my family from Chicago to Maine to move into a home that is literally 7 inches from a major highway, without thinking about what could happen?
Yeah.
What could happen with my young infantile child, my young toddler, mere centimeters away from an extremely busy highway? Lewis Creed's an idiot. top to
Yeah.
bottom, he is. I would be willing to bet that Louis Creed was probably near the bottom of his class, but yet you still graduate a doctor, so that's really all that matters. So they move out to Maine, and they move into a house, and she loves it, thankfully, because she's pretty frigid the entire rest of the movie. But she loves the house, and they meet their neighbor across the street, Judd, who is really just there to live across the street. He's old and retired. He's without any family, and he also lives 2.5 feet away from this super busy highway. And very early on in the movie, as Ellie is on the tire swing, that snaps and gives her dad an opportunity to be a doctor, she sees the pathway out of the yard into the woods. That's very actually very well manicured.
Yeah, it is.
You know, there's no That's the one thing that's a little heavy-handed in this movie. They are not trying to hide where the Pet Semetary is located.
No.
And so she wants to go see it. She falls out of a tree. I don't know how they got that tree, that tire swing, re-tied up.
I know.
Yeah, because it was like immediately after she fell, she's right back on it. And Judd agrees. I'll show you. I'll show you down to the Pet Semetary. And so he does. He takes them, and they get back there, and it's what a Pet Semetary would be.
Yeah.
And it's been there a long time. Judd's dog, Spot, is buried back there. And it's just this kind of concentric circle thing going on of the old pets are buried in the middle, and everybody spread their way out. Is like, how many people... Okay. I get the impression that because Judd's dog Spot is buried in the cemetery, and Judd still lives across the street, how many people have lived in the Creed's house?
Yeah, because this cemetery was like Judd said, like it started for the animals that get hit by these semis that go almost 100 miles an hour down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and there's like hundreds of pets.
Right. It is a huge cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he did mention, though, that not every animal buried in there was hit out on the highway, because there's a fish buried there.
Yeah.
But still, you don't see any other houses nearby. This is a cemetery, like, down a path in someone's yard. There's no other way there. Which makes me think that the Creed's new home has been moved in and out of annually.
Yeah. Or people just buy pets after they die.
Yeah. And then they get killed so it's like either somebody has owned 75 different animals and then eventually said, we've had enough. And they
Let's go somewhere else.
Or like I said, this is a revolving door lemon of a home that everybody just keeps moving in and out of. But not
Probably
Louis.
because their animals keep dying.
Not Louis. Louis is going to stick it out. So Louis is at work, and we meet our first gory piece. We meet Victor Pascal. Tell us a little bit about Victor.
He was a jogger, which you can tell in his very short shorts.
I was going to say the same thing if you did. You could tell because he's got on those like nylon shorts.
Yeah. And he was killed. I mean, you could have... They operated on him for a little bit, but there was nothing saving him. Hit by a truck.
No, his brain's
and
hanging out.
He warned Louis about the Pet Cemetery.
Right, yeah. And this is
I didn't
not before
really...
Go ahead.
I didn't really understand what he said.
What he spoke out about the Pet Semetary, it was kind of really hard to understand. But what he said to Louis... Judd says to Louis later, word for word.
Okay.
So it was one of those, like, it didn't make any sense when Louis heard it from Victor, because we weren't there yet. It was almost very similar, like last week when we talked about Stir of Echoes, 2 weeks ago with Stir of Echoes, where Kevin Bacon's character was like not hallucinating, but he was hallucinating conversations that haven't been had yet. Very similar to that. Like Pascal sits up and he talks about, like the soil or the whatever. But it didn't make any sense. Probably because Louis was freaking out that a dead body just sat up and spoke to him. And so, yeah, he does. He warns him. He calls Lewis by his name.
Yeah,
you know, it's
which
like,
really throws him
they
off.
bring in a near dead jogger, completely unresponsive, and then he just sets up when no one else is looking.
Yeah.
So then that night, Pascal comes back, and he visits Lewis at his house. He's a ghost because he's dead. And gets Lewis out of bed and takes him down to the pet cemetery. But being in the pet cemetery wasn't a big deal. But he warns them, don't cross the barrier. Of course, that doesn't make any sense to us, really.
It's sour.
Yeah. Don't cross the barrier. And of course, as he's pointing at the barrier, which is really just this giant thicket of sticks, you know, it starts to glow. And the the movie does a really, really good job of telling Lewis everything about something that they don't want him to do. Mm-hmm. Like, don't cross the barrier. The soil is sour. Later on, Judd's like, I'm going to tell you something, but I don't want you to do it. You know, like, and I'm like, well, then don't tell him, because nobody is going to wander through, because it wasn't a short path. No one's going to wander all the way there, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Lewis wakes up. He doesn't think that it was real. Like, because he wakes up in bed and he's like, oh, it's just a dream. Kicks off the sheets and his feet are just caked in mud. Yeah. So he clearly had been out of bed down there. Things are a little messy. Fast forward, no problems, whatever. We're assuming they moved in the summer. We don't really know, but it's Thanksgiving, and the family kind of splits up, right? Yes,
like mom and the kids are with her family.
Yeah, they go
back in Chicago,
and her family does not care for Lewis.
Yeah,
I don't really know why.
Probably because he makes all these big decisions without asking her.
Possibly, but it's like you like your wife.
She married a doctor.
Yeah, your daughter married a doctor, and you have 2 grandchildren, you know, from this marriage, and they're still together. Yeah, they do love each other, but man, Dad just hates him, and I don't really know why. Oh well, it never comes back up other than just he hates him. Yeah. And what happens while Rachel and the kids are with her parents?
Church gets hit by a semi.
Yeah, and okay, I'm going to give them this. It's Maine, and it's Thanksgiving, so I'm assuming it's cold. But that cat was like Velcroed to the grass. If he just got hit, it must have been a really hard frost, because his body, I mean, granted, your body's going to be cold, but like his body was frozen to the grass, which is just really, really, I don't know. It was like, wow, how long has he been laying there? And with the speed of the semis that are driving by that house,
how's there anything left?
Church was in good shape.
Yeah,
he was in really good shape. He just you kind of give that illusion, kind of like he made it off the road even. Yeah. He got clipped and drug himself into Judd's yard and died. Judd has an idea, because he thinks Ellie is going to be devastated at the death of her cat. So Judd has an idea. Yeah. Let's take the cat and go beyond the barrier. We'll go through the pet cemetery, which of course Lewis is like, oh, that's fine. Well, you know, we're going to this pet cemetery. That's where you bury your animals. No, where we're going. And takes him up through the barrier. And it's like a 7-day walk. Like,
yeah, seriously.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think the hobbits traveled as far trying to get to Mordor as Judd and Lewis did to get to the ancient Micmac burial ground. Yeah. A pair of man's souls. Oh, I love Judd. My wife asked me the other day, she goes, how much of the podcast are you going to do in his voice? I go, as much of it as I can.
The whole thing.
So they get up there, you know, and they're up there. And it's just like, again, we're at the top of this bluff, I guess. Yeah. Like, and there's no grass to be found. It's just a bunch of, again, kind of like the concentric circle setup that the cemetery had, only not so. And so we got the Micmac burial ground, And Lewis thinks Judd's going to help him. And Judd tells him, oh, no, up here you bear your own. And takes his pickaxe, and Judd lights a cigarette, and spends 6 hours breaking into this craggy, rocky soil to bury this cat. And then he did tell him the story, though, about... No, he gets to that later. So, Judd tells Lewis, don't tell anybody about what we've done. Just don't do it. And so the next day, Church has made his way back.
Yeah, with glowing eyes.
And he smells awful. He's a little herky-jerky. He's clearly not himself. But again, we know he's also very mean. He's a very mean cat now. I've had 2 gray cats in my life growing up, and both of them are mean.
Casey said that he had never seen this movie, but he said that growing up, they had a gray cat, and it was mean, and they called it Cheech.
Cheech.
And, and I guess he said that they shortened it after the cat on Pet Semetary, because I guess this is like his brother's favorite movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, yeah, Church.
Yeah. And so... we had one named Andre, and he was one of those that he would let you pet him, and then he would roll onto his back, and then he would donkey kick you with his claws. And it's like you just got to the point where nobody pet Andre. Why do we even have the cat? Whatever. Yeah. He doesn't like anyone, but that's why we don't have cats now. So Church comes back, and he's not the same. Lewis makes a comment to Judd about it being Ellie's cat. And he's like, oh, no, it's your cat now. And and then Judd tells him how when he was a boy, it's like Judd is such an awful neighbor.
He is.
Let's go up here to the Micmac burial grounds and bury Ellie's dead cat. Instead of just telling her cat's dead, let's go bury it so it comes back to life. But after you do that and you tell me how mean your cat is, I want to tell you a story about when I took my dog up there and my dog came back and he was also vicious. But hey, at least Ellie doesn't have to deal with grief. Judd. So we come back and the family's back and it's after the holidays or whatever. And it's like, you see what's coming. They're out... They're out in the field. They're having a picnic. It's like spring. We fast forward several months. Church is a member of the family again. Ellie doesn't, other than he stinks, Ellie doesn't suspect anything. They let him sleep in the room with her. And, you just fast forward several months and it's fine. So they're having a picnic and flying kites out in their field next to them. And... if there was an Olympic event for toddler sprinting, Gage would be the world record holder.
Yeah.
Because while they are... Well, we know his name is Gage. I'm not sure that Rachel knows what her son's name is. Because the entire movie, she just keeps calling him the baby.
Yeah.
And
it's like, no, he's walking. He's not a baby
anymore. Not anymore. And so Gage kind of breaks away from the group... because he was flying a kite and he dropped the string, so he's chasing the string. Before they realize what had happened, Gage is getting close to the highway. And we cut away to a semi the semi driver is listening to the Ramones, who have a song here, but they also sing the song over the end credits, Pet Semetary. So the Ramones, it's probably a band you don't know who I'm talking about, do you?
No.
That's all right.
Not at all.
Very influential, but that's whatever. So it's beyond beyond the classic age of.
Yeah, that's an oldies.
And so he's jamming out to the Ramones, kind of a punk rock group, and he's just pedal to the metal, full speed ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and on this road, honestly though, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
And it's anyone, you know what I mean? It is just a straight, flat, paved ground. Right. So it's I remember being in high school driving crazy on a bumpy road.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, anyone I don't want to say their right mind, but anyone who's honest would speed down this road.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. And just kind of jumped in my head. why does the Creed's house not have a fence yet?
Yeah. Yeah. Because Gage already almost got hit the first day.
Right. Yeah, they do. That, because Judd come
Judd
across. That's how they
that,
met
yeah,
Judd.
that's when Judd saved him.
And so Lewis is sprinting after Gage. Gage is chasing out into the street. And as always is the case in a horror film, right before Lewis gets to Gage, he trips.
Yeah.
And Gage ends up in the middle of the road. The semi-driver doesn't see him until it's too late, and just destroys this child.
Yeah, worse than the cat, which is like
closed casket funeral.
Like, I was not expecting this.
No.
Again, like, I'm thinking it's about
Stephen King for
the animals.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, they're gonna get him. And then when he doesn't, I was like, the semi will swerve. And then it was like, there's his bloody shoe going across the road. And I'm like, no!
Yeah.
No!
Yeah. Smash this kid. And so...
No!
So, Judd rightfully assumes that Lewis is already thinking about burying his kid in the Micmac burial ground.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't want to do that. No.
No.
And Lewis is like, no. And so Judd kind of now... he's really regretting his decision to telling Lewis about the burial ground. Judd thinks that, and granted, I blame it on the semi, but Judd is starting to believe that Gage's death was caused by the spirits of the Micmac burial ground, because it's their burial ground and Lewis was using it. So Judd tells the story to Lewis of, let me tell you what happens when you bury a human up there. Mm-hmm. And he tells him the story of a local named Bill who buried his son Timmy up there because he was killed in World War II. And they just shipped the body back, and I'm assuming that he exhumed the grave to get the body. I don't think they shipped the body back to the house. But the kid Timmy, he came back as a zombie, and was just a monster. Everybody was freaked out. And so they, basically the townsfolk, including Judd, were so put off by Timmy that they lit his house on fire. And the dad died with him. Yeah,
so burned both of them.
Judd Crandall, you are an awful person.
I know, he just can't keep his mouth shut.
It's like he knows hey, I buried my dog up there and he was terrible. And there was a human buried up there and I helped kill it. And it's like, but... I think things will be different with you. Mm-hmm. So Judd is, again, like, do not put your kid in the Micmac burial ground. We cut to the funeral scene.
Most traumatic funeral scene I've ever seen. Oh
my gosh, it's terrible.
Like,
the dad.
Oh my goodness.
Like Rachel's dad is there, and of course... Obviously, Lewis is very just despondent. Like, he's just so distanced and out there because of the grief that he's dealing with. The dad decides, hey, now's the time to get physical. He starts a fight and knocks the kids, the casket falls over. Oh, it was, like, this movie's heavy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is very, because it's like, listen, and, like, he was blaming him, and it's like, you can't do anything about, like, freak accidents happen all the time, and you can't do anything about them. And it was like, then Lewis saw just like a flash of Gage's arm when the casket, kind of flapped open a little bit, and then he went crazy, and it was just like,
it was terrible. It was terrible. Like, the worst, it's just awful. Like, you just hope that nothing like that ever happens at a funeral you attend. Yeah. Unless you don't care and you have popcorn, then you can sit back and enjoy it. Yeah. Rachel and Ellie head back to Chicago again. They leave Lewis at home because obviously they're not getting along with the parents. I don't think bringing Lewis back to his in-laws is a good idea. This part I didn't quite understand. They go back to just like, we're going to tie up some loose ends in Chicago. Yeah. What was your 2-year-old involved in? Yeah. That you needed to tie up some loose ends. Like, did he have business interests? Like, I don't understand. Well, we had to
Yeah.
get him unenrolled from a pre-K. Like,
Uh-huh.
but it's a reason for them to be out. Lewis is snapped. I've got to save my son.
Yeah.
So he's decided I'm going to dig up his body and go bury it in the Micmac burial ground. Pascal's ghost arrives again. Judd of course had warned him. He doesn't care. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So Pascal is now really desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And he is now like visiting Ellie.
Yeah, in her dreams.
Yeah.
And like Ellie's waking up, flipping out
Right.
because she's like, there's this ghost that says he's trying to help us and Daddy's going to do something bad. He's out to do something. But it's like no one's really taking her seriously.
No.
And
Mom does a little, like Mom doesn't really, but like because Ellie mentions Pascal's name.
Yes.
And that's when she's like, Pascal, where have I heard that before? As Pascal's standing like right here, still dripping blood, and he's like, you could. They did a really good job with his makeup effects.
They did.
He's creepy.
They did. He was, and he was like gray enough to where you actually believe he was dead.
Yeah.
And so Rachel, when she realizes like, oh yeah, Pascal, like that's where I've heard it from. She calls Judd because, of course, no one's at home at her house.
Yeah, because Lewis is taking that 7-day journey up to the Micmac burial grounds.
And she decides to come back to Maine, and Judd's like, no, don't come back. Like, he sits out, case of beer, smoking a cigarette, gonna watch for Lewis.
Yeah, because Judd knows what's going on.
Yes.
Granted, he can't tell Rachel what's going on because, again, Judd is 100% responsible for all of the aftermath.
Yeah.
Not the cause. It's not Judd's fault that Church and Gage died on the road, but it is 100% his fault of what Lewis is up to.
Mm-hmm. And so Lewis gets the lightest casket ever out of there, digs it up, takes him, and he buries him.
Yeah. In Maine, they bury you in balsa wood, I think.
Yeah.
It's very
the
very forward thing is biodegradable caskets.
Yeah. And he goes back, passes out on the bed because obviously he's done a lot of work, and that is where we see Gage reaching up from the burial ground.
The Micmacs got to work on him. Like, he got back just as fast as Church did.
He was.
And Church is a cat. He's got some speed, 4 paws, etc. Lewis, it took him forever to get back. Gage was like following him home, basically.
Yeah. And he gets in his dad's bag, steals a scalpel, and heads on over to play with Judd for a little bit.
Yeah.
And
What'd you think of the slicing and dicing that Gage did?
The Achilles being cut hurt my Achilles.
Yes, it did.
Like,
I remember that as a kid.
Ooh.
I've probably mentioned it before. I obviously love horror, and the gore and violence doesn't bother me, but the more realistic the violence, the more it bothers me.
Yeah, and like when you see someone cutting in, like sometimes, it makes me like, oof, I can kind of feel that. But it's like my toes were folding up at this point as I'm laying in bed watching this because I'm like, oh, the Achilles, I couldn't imagine that.
Yeah, like anytime they show somebody like where they're going to take blood in a movie and they show the needle, like I have to turn away. I'm okay with needles, but just like that's a pain I can associate with.
Yeah.
And there you go. But like people getting her arm chopped off, whatever. Like, I don't know what that feels like.
So
but this Achilles, like I can imagine what this feels like. And then for Judd to turn around and get that same scalpel, just give him the old.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like if you've ever had dry lips or something, right here is the most sensitive. It's like, man, Gage went for where it really hurts.
Or you got a small mouth and you try to just take a Pringle in all at once.
Yeah.
That's where it's getting you, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was poor Judd.
So Judd is a goner. Like after Gage does that and Judd falls to his back, Gage just like rips his throat out.
Yeah, has a snack with his throat.
He just and goes into snacking. Rachel took apparently a direct flight from Chicago Airport to the Creed's backyard because she is there immediately.
Immediately.
Like, let's not lose fact of Lewis is warned by Pascal, don't do it. He then goes and digs his son's body up. Meanwhile, the same night, I'm not kidding, the same night Pascal visits Ellie to be like, hey, your dad's up to no good. Rachel then from Chicago somehow gets to Maine in the same night.
Yeah, and because she has
because Gage,
a flat tire, everything.
Yeah, because did she drive back? Yeah, she drove back.
She got that rental car because remember Pascal's right. When she had gotten back to Maine, right. Pascal's like, ask for this car.
Yeah, but she did. She got a ticket to a every hour on the hour flight. She flies back to Maine, gets a rental car, drives, gets a flat tire, then hitches a ride in a semi that luckily was going right by her home because every semi in Maine drives by the Creed's house. But we're talking like in the same night.
Yeah.
Because
hours.
Yeah.
Just hours. Because he was just sleeping.
Like in the midst of I'm going to dig up my son's body to I'm taking a nap now.
Yeah.
Rachel gets from Chicago to Maine. No.
And she
Chicago to home.
Yeah. Not just Maine.
Right.
Home. And she hears this like her sister's voice because her sister, who is creepy.
Yeah, that last week when I kind of shuddered at the end because I'd forgotten it was Zelda that I forgot.
And we just like totally skipped over her. Like
that's okay.
Rachel has trauma from her sister. Like whatever is wrong with her sister, she's like a clinically insane person they talked about, and Rachel had to like take care of it, and she died on Rachel's watch when her parents let her just.
Yeah, we're gonna go out for a few hours. Rachel, you take care of Zelda. Zelda was my nightmare growing up.
She was. She is very creepy.
Yeah, is that
just
not
the way
the most
that they
like? I'm glad we didn't talk about it last week because I even said to my wife, I'm like. Because we watched it, of course, the other day. I'm like, I wonder how Courtney's going to handle Zelda.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. And the way that she is when Rachel goes into Judd's house because she hears Zelda's voice and she goes upstairs and Zelda's like, I'm going to twist your back like mine. And
they're in the wide angle lens and she comes running at the camera. Yeah. Like the hair on the back of my neck standing up right now. Like I couldn't watch it. I haven't been able to watch it since I was a kid. Like she robbed me of nights of sleep.
Yeah. She is 100% creepy.
Yeah.
Just disgusting looking.
Played by a guy. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but Zelda was just
totally disgusting looking.
The visual like spine, the emaciated skin.
Everything is sunken.
The sounds when she's eating, just smacking that food. And then again, just the twisting and turning, and it was disturbing. And the best part is completely useless part of the movie.
Yeah,
this is the power of Stephen King. Because he wrote the screenplay for this movie too. So he said, I'm going to write a novel, and I'm going to put a character in here that does nothing to advance any part of the story whatsoever. But I'm going to make it the most terrifying thing ever. And Zelda is right up there with the scariest things I've ever seen. Rachel is, she's lured back over to Judd's by Zelda's voice. But what she's actually seeing is Gage. Yeah,
and she's in shock. Like, she's like, oh my goodness, like, my son. And so she goes down to hug him, and we don't see it on screen, but we assume, that he gets her with the scalpel as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He killed her. Like, she's dead. Yes. She's a goner.
So it heads back across the street to Lewis, and he wakes up from his power nap.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Boy, he missed some stuff.
Yeah, he did. He got some deep sleep because he looks down. Gage's muddy footprints are in the house. He gets a call from Gage saying come play with me, Daddy. I've been playing with Dad or with Mommy and Mr. Judd.
And
like,
now I want
come
to
play with me.
Now I want to play with you.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh crap! Like what?"
So he decides he's gonna get himself prepared and take some, like, I'm assuming it was morphine. It was something.
Yeah.
Just basically, he's gonna knock him out, like, because he knows. He knows.
Yeah.
And this is one thing Lewis does have an advantage of is, because of church, he knows what the Micmac burial ground does to a person, but yet did it anyway. So Lewis is prepared. It's I'm ready. I'm ready. So he gets over there. He encounters Church first.
Yeah, and he injects him,
and gone. Church is dead.
Yeah.
And then, Gage is basically like taunting him.
Yeah, he is like, "Daddy, come find me."
And so
the little giggles.
Lewis walks right into his trap as Rachel's body falls from the attic. Like, because Gage hung her.
Yeah.
I mean, he killed her and then hung her body up, and then I'm assuming there was a tripwire or something that Lewis tripped on. This is par for the course of horror films. Like, a body is going to show up out of nowhere exactly when you need it to. But that's what happens here. Lewis realizes, of course, he didn't even know Rachel was back.
No.
Let alone Rachel's back and now dead.
Yeah.
So now,
and
Lewis,
Gage jumps from the attic where Rachel's at and goes after Lewis with this scalpel now.
Yeah. Hacking him up. And again, it's just flesh wounds at this point. Even though we know Gage knows what to do, but I'm assuming he doled that, he probably doled that scalpel as he cut through the Achilles and then whatever he did to his mom. But Lewis, realizing that he's in a wrestling match with a 2-year-old, quickly wins because he's wrestling a 2-year-old. And he hits Gage with the morphine. And really felt bad for this kid. This actor, Miko Hughes, he's been in a lot of stuff. He was in Kindergarten Cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger, another movie you haven't seen. He was a recurring character on Full House, a TV show you probably haven't seen much of.
Nope.
So yeah, Miko Hughes has been around quite a bit. And so, but he did a really good job of that stumbling away and then falling and hitting his head on, because
like, that's not fair, Daddy.
Right.
It's not fair.
And it was just he was an adorable kid.
Even though he's evil, I'm like, it's not fair, buddy.
I'll take a chance on you.
Yeah, I would. I'd give him some love.
So then, he's like, well, he lights Judd's house on fire because you figure, well, it's done. Like,
yeah.
But again, Lewis is still snapped. Because we see the house catch on fire, and what is Lewis carrying out of the house?
Rachel's body.
And where does he go?
To the Micmac burial ground.
Straight to the Micmac burial ground.
In his mind, she just died, so it might work better.
That's right. She's fresh.
Like, he waited.
Yeah.
He waited for Gage, and here's Pascal standing like, don't make it worse. Don't do this.
Yeah.
And nope. He's like, no, it's going to work this time.
Yep.
Walks right through Pascal.
And it's fine. It'll work. And then Lewis comes back, and he's just waiting. He's just waiting for Rachel to show up.
Sitting in the kitchen floor, shuffling some cards.
He's just waiting. And Rachel comes through, and the exquisite makeup effects on Rachel. Yeah. She comes through.
The way the pus is shooting out of her eye.
I'm so glad you saw that. I don't know how many times I saw this as a kid and never picked up on that, but you're absolutely right. She comes out.
The way he kisses her.
Yes, and we just saw that amber colored pus leaving her eye socket, and then he just smashes his lips against it.
Yeah, and it's not even like a drip.
No,
this is spewing out of her face, and he's just full on making out with her, and I'm just gagging. No.
And we see Rachel pick up a knife from the counter. We hear Lewis scream. And that's really the one thing I'll give this movie credit for is, with the exception of the violence against Judd from Gage, we saw nothing on screen. It was all left to your imagination. And we assume Rachel took the knife to Lewis. Lewis is now dead. And that's it. That's it for Pet Semetary.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because I knew Zelda, at least to me, was a huge, horrific part. But again, her story, the same thing. Like, I have a really hard time in movies watching people hang. And when Missy, the helper, like, she's kind of the housekeeper kind of thing, she hung herself early in the movie. She was just so depressed.
Yes.
That is like, oh man, watching the feet twitch just gets me.
Yeah.
But that's Pet Semetary. I'm glad Zelda showed up in our conversation because
she's just nasty.
Hard to watch. Her skin's kind of brown. Like, no, she's clearly Caucasian, but just, it's like aged paper. Like,
yeah, and like her hair is like just so thin.
They did a great job.
Brittle looking. Yeah,
great job. And so that is Pet Semetary. I'm glad you liked it. Matter of fact,
I did.
I'm curious what kind of grade you're going to give this movie.
It is getting a solid A for me because I wish I could say just because Gage is so cute.
You can say that.
Because one, like, again, like, it was nothing that I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And then it had the perfect amount of like gore with that. And then, like you said, like leaving to your imagination, the storyline was good. I really liked this. And I think it was real. Like, I don't know. I don't like to think, but it just showing.
Yeah, we know. I don't like to think.
Lewis, like, going off the deep end after his kid was brutally killed. Like, that sometimes is, I don't know, like, that is probably how a lot of parents would act. Like, they would do anything to get their kid back.
It was like you could rationalize his response to trauma.
Yes. Yes.
You know, like, and really, how many of us, you know, obviously we're not in that, how many of us would do the same thing? If we know there was a resuscitation burial ground a couple miles away, like how many of us would try it? I don't know, but yeah, clearly the message here is the difficulty of letting go, and so when Stephen King took that, something that all of us will experience at some point in our lives, of losing something important to us, losing someone important to us, and how we deal with that grief, and then he turned it on its head and was like, what if you didn't have to say goodbye? But knowing that what you're getting back may not be worth, you know. Yeah. And so, good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, I really liked it.
I'm going to give it an A as well. This is a movie I watched a lot as a kid. I closed my eyes through Zelda's scenes all the time. I already was uncomfortable when my wife and I watched it earlier this week, knowing she was coming. I'm like looking away as I could hear her. Her voice didn't bother as much as her visuals. But there's so much in this movie I appreciate. I appreciate that it's not a violent movie, but yet there is gore. Yeah. I appreciate the attention to the gore. Like, Pascal was gross looking. Zelda was gross looking. Rachel after death was gross looking. The Achilles and mouth cuts were gross. Like, but not like make you vomit, but just like effective. And so kudos there. Directed by a woman too. Not that makes any difference, because I think women in film get underutilized. But she directed this. She also directed the sequel, Pet Semetary 2. Kind of rolling through here, but yeah, she's directed some other things I've seen, but nothing of that like you probably would hear of. So.
Probably not.
But no, it's Mary Lambert is the director's name. She did a good job. She directed a lot of music videos too. But no, I think the attention to emotion is something that gets lost a lot with certain filmmakers, and I think she did a great job of capturing that trauma and emotion. What type of educational lesson do you have?
This one is just going to be plain and simple. Like, parents, please pay attention to your children.
Yeah.
Like, I get you're letting a 2-year-old, like, go out and fly a kite, but there was no reason for him to be that far away from them in the beginning.
Right.
And when you live on and this can go for teachers too, like, there's no reason that, like, when we take our kids outside, like, I'm constantly counting my kids, making sure they're being safe, like, just keeping them away from the road. Just
Right.
pay attention to,
Yeah.
especially the littles, like, pay attention to them because they don't have that right from wrong safety in their brains
Oh, yeah,
yet.
of course not. No, they're one-track mind. Very well stated. I'm going to take a often used quotation of, it's just kind of a witticism of Albert Einstein, and that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I'm going to use that in the educational method of, and obviously in the universe of this movie, the amount of pets that have been killed on the highway, yet there's no fences.
Yeah.
That you saw what happened with Church and with Gage, and yet you buried your wife. Like, this whole trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome is just ridiculous. And so for students out there, keep that in mind. If you try an experiment and it doesn't work, it's because something needs to change. Trying it again isn't going to work. How many times have we all typed in a password and it didn't work? So then we type in the password again and it still doesn't work. And then we go ahead and try it a third time.
Yeah, it's like, maybe I typed it wrong the first 2
Right.
times. Let me make sure. No.
And so, but yeah, that happens to all of us. And are we all insane? Of course not. But if there is a reoccurring activity going on, a reoccurring thing that you are experiencing, and you don't like the outcome, maybe try something else.
Yeah.
Try something different. So, well put. All right, Pet Semetary is in the books. It's my time for my favorite part of the show. What are we doing next week?
Let's shuffle it.
Shuffle it. All right, I'm pulling it up
I had
right.
a brain fart for a minute.
It's all right.
I was like,
Pulling
what's
it
the
up-
word?
Pulling it up right now. Let's see. I'm curious. I feel like it's been a little bit since we shuffled. All
It
right.
has, because we had
Megan,
movies.
and then
And then Stir of Echoes.
yeah, which wasn't really shuffled, but I saw it. I was like, hey, let's watch that.
And then The Haunting of Hannah Grace. And
Yeah,
this
so
one.
it feels like it's been about a month since we shuffled.
yeah.
So let me pull it up. Here we go. Library, movies, title. No, let's go by genre. Genre and horror. And I got 921 titles here. Shuffle takes us to... Ooh. We're going to watch an uber classic. We are going to watch next week 1980s Prom Night.
Okay.
It has been-
with prom coming up.
It is, prom coming up. It has been remade somewhat recently.
Jamie Lee Curtis?
Jamie Lee Curtis again, yes. Jamie Lee Curtis in Prom Night. This was still high. Of course, this is 2 years after Halloween, where Jamie Lee Curtis was very entrenched in her Scream Queen persona. Early in her career, she spent a lot of time making horror films. And this was one of her earlier ones. If we roll back through, let me go all the way down to see her. She debuted in 1977, but really, she was on a bunch of TV shows or something. And then she was in Halloween in 78, The Fog in 1980, which was let's put it this way. The Fog in 1980 was a horror film. Prom Night in 1980 was a horror film. Terror Train in 1980 was a horror film. Road Games in 1981 was a horror film. Halloween 2 in 1981 was a horror film. Halloween 3, she had a voice in it, in 1982 was a horror film. Really, she didn't hit any mainstream she was in other things, but she didn't hit any mainstream non-horror movies until 1983. So pretty much she lived in the horror genre for like 5 years and cranked out good ones. Like Halloween was John Carpenter, The Fog was John Carpenter, Prom Night was a big predecessor for a lot of slasher films today, especially like Scream. Terror Train was directed by was thinking the wrong name, but it's not very good, but it was fun. But again, just a slasher. Road Games was an Australian like hitchhiker film that he had a pretty good following. It's just really good. But then of course she's been in other things as well. She really worked hard to get out of the horror genre, then find herself back in, with Halloween films later in her career, and it still lives in there a little bit. But no, Jamie Lee Curtis, and she said it herself. She wouldn't have her career if it wasn't for the horror films. But she is. I'm a big fan of Jamie Lee Curtis, and this is another Jamie Lee Curtis film. I'm not going to say much about it. I've seen this movie a handful of times. It's fun, but it's very 1980. Like there's still some disco, but it is it's about a killer that's calling people, kind of like Black Christmas like in a way.
Okay.
But it's good. I like it. So 1980 Prom Night. Yay! I like it when a good shuffle comes up.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, we really haven't had a bad one yet.
No, we really haven't. But it's like
I was thinking like one that wasn't very good would come up before now, but
I'm sure we'll get there. But keep in mind, we are shuffling out of my self-curated horror collection.
Yeah.
So we're not going to come across like Children of the Corn 5 or anything like that. So next week we will be covering Prom Night, starring Jamie Lee Curtis and a non-funny Leslie Nielsen. I know you don't know who that is. But Leslie Nielsen was in the Naked Gun movies in the 90s and late 80s and 90s. Very funny guy, but he's not a funny guy in this one. So Jamie Lee Curtis and Leslie Nielsen in Prom Night. When it comes to social media, you know where to find us: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Tell people. That's our challenge to you this week. If you made it this far in the show, tell somebody. All right? I'm to the point where I might even just be like, hey, can everybody just share this post? Just share it. Just to get the word out there, whether you listen or not. Do us a favor and just share it. Just to see if we could drum up some more listeners and viewers, because our numbers aren't terrible.
We did get a new follower this week on Spotify.
We did. But Possession of Hannah Grace had 13 views on YouTube.
That's not bad.
Megan had 27. Creep 2 had 15. Krampus had 15. But there, for every one of those, there's Drag Me to Hell with 3. It Follows with 3. I'll Take Your Dead 4. Skinamarink Malignant 4. We've got Don't Open Till Christmas with 2, which is fine because honestly I wouldn't want to watch that one again anyway. But we have The Craft with 18. So it seems like whenever we cross over, we've had 2 guests, and our 2 guests
brought us.
Yeah. Our first episode had 25, and our second episode had 20. And then it kind of slowed down from there. But that's okay. We're still young. We're still young.
We still enjoy it.
Oh yeah, I don't do it for the numbers. I do it because it's fun. But yeah, we'll be watching Prom Night for next week. So yeah, we've got a horror film in the other one in my other podcast as well.
Ooh.
We got our first guest. We're like 72 episodes in, and we have our first guest. So we're ahead of the curve on that one. Do you have anything you want to send us out with?
Nope. Have a wonderful week.
Yeah, same. Everybody have a good, enjoyable week. Enjoy the early March weather, and we'll see you next week with Prom Night.